Hey tubers. Okay, so you're hearing a lot from me right now, but I realized today after I posted yesterday's video that somebody had asked questions on the other video before that, and I didn't answer it, and I missed it somehow. So I just want to address that real quick. So I think the question was I worried that Aetna was going to turn me into my employer, and was I worried about my employer finding out? So what I want to do is share with you the conversation that I had with Aetna and how it went, because this will kind of explain it. In the United States, we have a law, it's called HIPAA, and basically it has to do with protection of your personal health information. It's a pretty strict law. It's the Health Information Privacy Protection Act, I believe. I can look that up, but I think that's what it means. HIPPA. Okay, so here's the thing. When I realized that, and this is the progress of what I went through when I was doing the research. I knew I had heard some time ago, and understand that the trans legal community is pretty tight. There are a bunch of us that are transgender and a bunch of us that are lawyers, but in the grand scheme of people, we are a pretty tight group, and we kind of know each other, at least on some level. And so we have some places where we communicate together about the legal side of things that impact the trans community. And so some years ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago, whatever it was, there was a big push between WPATH and the AMA and the acceptance of the standards. I think it's the number 7 standards that we have now. And I'd had kind of a conversation with Jameson Green about this some years ago when he was here in town, and my understanding was that there was this kind of push towards medical necessity for these types of surgeries. And so Jameson and his group and a lot of people that work in trans health had spent a good portion of time pushing the AMA to accept the fact that these are medically necessary surgeries, and major insurance companies to do the same. Aetna was one of those insurance companies. So if you go to Google and you type in transgender surgery coverage, health insurance coverage, or any of that type of search, you will find there was one particular site I found, but there's several of them, and they list all the major insurance carriers, and they have a link to their policies. So, dog. So, if you go, you'll go down, there's United Healthcare, there's Aetna, there's Cigna, all of the major health carriers, the big ones. And then you click on them, and it will take you to the website for that carrier. So this is how this conversation began. When I went to see Dr. Crane for my initial consultation, I went in believing that this surgery was going to cost me about $50,000. And I had moved some things around. I was in a position where I thought, okay, worst case scenario, I could maybe do $50,000. It was going to be hard, and I was going to be paying on it for the next 30 years, but maybe I could do it. And I had that kind of all worked out in my head. When I got to his office, we started talking, and early in the conversation, he was pretty much like, what kind of questions did I have? Because a lot he already answered. There's a video that he makes you watch. It's an informed consent video, and so he kind of gives you the whole rundown in that video, and they ask you to watch that before you come in for the consultation, so you kind of know what you need to ask. And of course, we got to that question: how much? How much is this going to cost me? So, for the first surgery, he said it was going to be $75,000. And I have to tell you, it took everything in my power not to just drop my jaw to the floor, because I totally had not estimated that much. So, when I left his office, to be honest with you, I kind of felt on one level a little, really? Stop. I felt kind of bummed because I thought, okay, I had this idea in my head about what I could do, and now he totally took it out of my ballpark. So as we spoke, some of the ideas we came up with were the possibility of my buying a marketplace plan that would cover it. And I asked him, do you know, or does your office know of any of the marketplace plans that might cover my surgery? And so he had told me to call the office in San Francisco because his insurance people there, like, they deal with this all the time, so they would be able to give me a list of those kinds of things. I'm like, okay. But I really truly walked out of there thinking, well, that was great. What a wonderful consultation. This is never going to happen for me because there's no way in hell I'm coming up with $100,000. So it's going to be 2 surgeries that I have to have. The first one he said it would be about $75,000, and the second one's going to be between $12,000 and $15,000. By the time you're all done, you're close to $100,000. Shit you can buy in a house for $100,000. So when I got back to my buddy's apartment and we were sitting down, I just started surfing, and that was when I found the policy with Aetna. And so when I called Aetna, the lady answered the phone, and I said, okay, I want to make sure before I say anything else, I do need to ask you some questions, but I need to make sure that our conversation is covered by HIPAA and that everything we discuss is between you and me and you're not going to share that with anyone else. And she said, yep, that's correct. I can't share it with anyone else. And then we started the conversation, and I kind of was around the bush a little bit because I didn't want to go straight to the point. I didn't want to say, okay, I'm trans, this is my thing. I didn't want to go there. So I asked her sort of in a non-direct way, and this is basically the crux of what I asked, right? I have an insurance policy, and my insurance card has your name on it. Now, I understand that my insurance policy actually comes from the state of Texas. And I've read the policy, and I know what it says it covers and it doesn't cover. And it explicitly says in my policy, it does not cover, and these are the exact words, transsexual surgeries. But it lists it as a prohibited coverage under elective procedures. So I said to the lady, I know this is what my policy covers. Are you going to call the school district or the state to get authorization for my claim? Or does the state hire Aetna to manage the policy, and then whatever Aetna's criteria is what the state just trusts you to do? And she said, if Dr. Crane calls for pre-authorization and provides all the information that Aetna requires for gender reassignment surgery as medically necessary, then it's covered. And I said, so are you not going to go back to the school district and send them a note and check in with them or tell them or anything? She said, no, we're not going to do that. I was like, okay. And I said, so do I need to worry about you telling the people that I work for about my status? And she goes, we can't do that. And she's right. Legally, they can't. If they were to call the school district and tell them, they'd be violating, they would pay for my surgery moreover because I'd sue the living shit out of them. So I'm not worried about the school district finding out, because I have to tell you this. I didn't set out to be stealth. I just set out to be me. And every day in my life, I sort of wrestle with this problem between being myself and people knowing. And it's not really that I give a shit if people find out, except for they change. And that irritates me. Because, you know, it's a funny thing. When you have knowledge that you didn't have before, somehow that affects the way you view things. And so I like my life the way it is. I like this. But being here with you on YouTube, you know, I take a risk every time. I keep waiting for one of my students to run across my videos. I'm sure it's absolutely possible. Of course, the only students I think that would be looking for it would be my queer students or my questioning students, And they wouldn't tell on me because they're already out there looking for answers to begin with. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. And I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, I've already decided the way that I'm going to handle this. The moment that it does become news to them, I'm going to be like, really? You just figured that out? Was that an issue? Ultimately, what I know for a fact is that the longer you spend time with people, the more they think they know you, the harder it is for them to discriminate against you when they find out a fact they weren't expecting, right? And I'm okay with that, because maybe that's how I open minds and hearts, and they learn something they didn't know. So when they wake up one day and say, "Oh my God, that's what transgender is? You, all this time I've known you, and that's it? It wasn't a big deal. You're just Chase. Nobody cares." That's how they learn. Anyway, so I just want to answer the question about the insurance. If my insurance company tells the school district and I lose my job, I'll be a rich man. That's all I can say. I'll be a rich man. Because that's a violation of the federal HIPAA laws. So I hope that answers your question. And I'm sure I'll be back soon. There's a whole lot more to this journey. Peace.